A narrow and long artificial island 10 kilometers from Kronstadt. There is an almost kilometer-long fortress wall on which guns are mounted. All year round, in storms and calms, artillerymen cover the Northern Fairway, the entrance to Peter the Great's capital. There are 342 people in the garrison. Service people have been cut off from the mainland for months. In wartime, the strength of the unit increases to 998 people. Thick concrete walls, low ceilings of dark, cold casemates, shell magazines, metal that burned your hands. This was probably the everyday situation at the fort. There were 30 different caliber guns located here. Now, of course, there are no weapons on the island. Obruchev is the largest of the Kronstadt forts. He has a partner, Fort Totleben. They were immediately conceived as a couple, and were simply called A&B. They began to be built in 1869, and were finished only in 1913. Fort B received the name Adjutant General Obruchev in 1897. Obruchev N.N., chief of the General Staff, who did a lot for Kronstadt. In 1919, an uprising against the Bolsheviks broke out at the fort. It was suppressed, and the fort became Krasnaya. The fort defended the northern capital for another 30 years, and then lost its military significance. Construction of the fort began in 1896 during the reconstruction of the Kronstadt fortress. The basis of the reconstruction was the construction of 2 bulk islands to accommodate large artillery forts with concrete casemates and shell magazines. The forts were named A and B. Fort at Totleben was located on a sandbank 4 kilometers west of Sestroretzk and 10 kilometers from Kotlin Island. The depths here ranged from 2 to 4 meters. Fort B was planned 7 kilometers southwest of Fort A and 4 kilometers from Kotlin Island. The depths here reached 4 to 5 meters. The Northern Fairway leading to the capital passed between the forts. Fort B in 1897 was given the name Adjutant General Obruchev, in honor of the chief of the General Staff N.N. Obruchev, who did a lot to modernize the Kronstadt fortress on the occasion of Obruchev's retirement. Survey work in the fort construction area was completed in 1896, and construction began in January 1897, which was scheduled to be completed in 1903. By 1903, only the construction of bulk islands and harbors was completed, and the construction of artillery batteries and the placement of guns on the forts continued until 1913, when the forts were transferred to the authority of the chief of the fortress artillery. The lengthy construction of the forts was associated with a qualitative change in artillery, which the designers could not foresee in 1895, when the fort projects were laid out. The length of the battle front of the fort was 950 meters. In 1916, 10 254 mm, 6 280 mm, 10 152 mm and 4 120 mm guns were placed at the Obruchev fort. The staff strength of the garrison of Fort Obruchev was determined in 1913 and amounted to 342 people in peacetime, and 998 in wartime. After the suppression of the anti-Bolshevik uprising at the fort in 1919, it was renamed Krasnaya. The commanders of the fort, having received information about the beginning of the uprising, arrested all the communists of the fort and sympathizers of the Soviet regime. But they failed to win over the fort's team. The fort garrison, having received information about the real situation, released the arrested communists and arrested the rebels. In 1925 to 1927, 2 203mm guns from the armored cruiser Rurik were installed at the fort. In the 1930s, the forts were modernized, and by the beginning of the Great Patriotic War, 254mm, 203mm turret, 152mm, 120mm and 45mm guns were installed on them. The artillery of the fort took part in the Soviet-Finnish War of 1939-1940, supporting the offensive of troops on the Karelian Isthmus, and then in the Great Patriotic War, complicating the advance of Finnish troops to Leningrad. In the 1950s, the fort was abandoned and brought to a deplorable state. All the metal was cut out, the wooden lining of the casemates was lost. The construction of Fort Obruchev, which initially received only the name Fort B, began simultaneously with the construction of Fort Totleben in 1896 during the reconstruction of the Kronstadt fortress. Already during construction in 1897, the fort was given the name Adjutant General Obruchev, in honor of the chief of the General Staff N.N. Obruchev. Unlike their older brick and stone counterparts, the new forts were built entirely from concrete. Heavy, up to 11 in. Guns were supposed to exclude with their fire the possibility of enemy ships passing through the Northern Fairway. The fort received quite impressive dimensions, about 900 meters in length. By 1903, the filling of the island and the construction of the harbor were completed, and the construction of concrete casemates and artillery positions began. The construction of the fort was completed by 1913. This delay was caused by a revision of the project, which affected mainly artillery weapons. In 1913, the fort's armament consisted of 10 10-inch, 6 11-inch, 10 6-inch and 4,120 mm guns. The garrison of the fort amounted to 998 people, according to wartime standards. According to peacetime standards, the size of the garrison was reduced by almost 3 times. By the beginning of the First World War, the fort was fully combat ready, and, together with its brothers Totleben, and Krasnaya Gorka, it could well have resisted the forces of Hohseeflotte, if Grand Admiral Tirpitz had had an adventurous idea to attack by the forces of the fleet, the most powerful sea fortress in the Baltic, Kronstadt. However, the fort never had a chance to fire at the enemy. As you know, the Kaiser's battleships got stuck in Moonsund, and then the revolution of 1917 completely took the Russian Empire out of the war.
Это от печки, вот сзади, которая печка. Ну вот сзади тебя печка. Это печка.
Что ты делаешь, что ты
Потому что вытяжка наверх идет. Вон, видишь, дырка вот здесь. Вот где мы смотрели, только там было... О, смотрите аккуратно, кстати, что ботинки не впилось на полу.
Ребята, в следующей серии мы вернемся, обязательно запомним.
Обратно спрыгивать только.
Запомни правила, когда лезешь,
наоборот, надо заранее подумать, чтобы потом, если что, не
да
лезть.
ладно.
Реально что-то есть сверху.
А?
Реально что-то есть сверху.
Мягкая посадка?
Это как в том
Для селфи, да?
А здесь тоже на 28-е, тоже 8-е. Ну что?
Да нет ничего здесь. Ничего интересного. Кстати, а здесь это экран получше, да?
А?
Только тоннель такой же.
Есть! Егор, ты ладно,
А снимать? Она снимает?
Подожди, а что тут вода?
Потому что
Толян спускался?
вы тут попой нагрели.
Толян спускался и...
Это солнце.
Потому что солнце.
Солнце питает. Солнце жарит.
Ползуны. У вас тут оползень.
Давай, пошло.
Блин, надо прицелиться.
Давай. Там главное нету дальше лестницы.
Да-да-да, шахта.
Сделанный по рейсу.
Да. Ой, здесь, конечно, тоже.
А вот, кстати, тут вход куда-то есть, ребят. Налево. Держись подальше, мало ли кого есть.
А вот
Давайте здесь поедем.
света было бы здесь побольше.
Кстати, смотри-ка, сохранившиеся.
А, это ворота, вот они, да? Опять тупик.
Если то...
Че, совсем редко тебе, да? Все, кто на сообщение пишет, ответь.
Опа, а вот и...
Опа-па. Ой-ой-ой. Ой-ой-ой. Какие эти перила.
Можно, по идее, если, я думаю, мы с первого этажа туда пойдем.
Там, да. Там что-то валяется даже. Остатки. А, ты завернул туда, что ли? Да.
Дверь деревянная, покрытая железными листами. Некоторые двери не механические, а деревянные. Со сверху металлом. Видно, что не все на офисе. Смотри. Отсюда все. Снизу вон.
Опа, смотри, какая здесь.
Видимо, чудо докатался снарядом. А, это две двери.
Чтобы стрелять очередями?
А вот как раз шахта, которая поднимает нас. А здесь враги сейчас стоят. А, да. Плохо. Никола Питерский. ДМБ-76. 8, 16. Так, 6 месяц. Томск какой? А, имя июня 16 года. А, 76 года. 16